Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another fantastic episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. I'm your host, Bernadette, and is today's special guest is Jeff. Jeff, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You can tell that I'm slowly getting my brain's getting foggy and tired. That makes me human. Welcome, Jeff.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited this for the conversation.
Yes, yes. So where about are you tuning in from?
South Carolina,
Awesome.
right at the beach.
What's the weather like? Is it warm there too?
It's actually becoming a bit more mild by our standards, so it might be in the low 80s, but it's
Awesome.
not as in the summertime. Sometimes you'll walk outside and you'll start sweating immediately. It's not like that today, so it's a good day.
Oh, oh, that's awesome. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jeff, can you tell us more about you and the work that you do?
sure. So I'm the CEO of Coastal Leadership Coaching. I've also authored two books. The Still Marinating
Mhm.
came out last year, and then The Other Side of the Coin just came out this past week. So very excited about that. So I speak at events, lead and coach, and do training. Additionally, I mean, and then I would even say more importantly, been married for 26 years to my high school sweetheart, Kendra. We're also empty nesters with two awesome kids, Allison and Jacob, who are kind of crushing it in their own right now. So it's just overall very blessed with what I get to call normal.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. What was your childhood like? And did you always want to do the work that you're doing and publishing books and writing?
Um, had a good childhood. Had very supportive parents,
Mhm.
very involved. In fact, ironically, the books came from my parents in a sense, but indirectly, as I never knew that I would be an author or be a writer. I mean, I always enjoyed writing, but my mom, as I write in the first book, has dementia, and she's really kind of lost, the traditional way of what people would say is normal.
Yeah.
But and growing up, she was my intellectual sparring partner. So
Mhm.
when she really got hit hard with dementia, a few other things happened that same year, and really kind of you know started to shell up, I guess, a little bit. But it
Mhm.
was a good friend of mine that really pushed me forward and said, "Hey, you got to utilize this time, and God's blessed you with all these gifts. So, how about you actually utilize them and don't let, unfortunately, what's happening with your mom, just weigh you down too much." So it was actually an inspiration because of my mom, being that intellectual sparring partner, and unfortunately, her having dementia now. I wanted to still continue on how I've been blessed and to pay it forward. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, so I guess kind of a long answer to a short question, but a great childhood, loving parents, who were, supported me in pretty much every endeavor. But yeah, no, I never thought I'd be one that writes books back then.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some fun memories, traditions, that you had as a child that you passed on to your kids and family?
Well, for as busy as we were, I knew that it was always a challenge to get everybody together around the table. Um, so, because I was in activities, my brother was in activities, and it's like we were running by the seat of our pants some days.
Mhm.
So now that my kids are out of the house, also we try to have them over as often as we can. Usually, like a Sunday lunch after church, and just try to get at least once a week, where we can kind of catch up and break some bread together and share some life. So that's one thing that we really try to work on. It doesn't always work out every week, but thankful that it does most.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what are some other lessons or lessons you've learned from being an empty nester?
Wow, that's a great question. So having kids at the house here, there's obviously a lot of things that are always going on. Now, our kids were very independent, and they were able to do a lot of things, on their own. So they didn't require a lot of attention, but you still, as parents, you're always kind of paying attention and seeing, hey, just do I need to make sure I'm available for this or for that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken some reprogramming, but both books came after being an empty nester. So it's like I've got all this extra time now. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So additionally, my wife and I also get to lead a life group through our church where we go through a book of the Bible at a time. So things like that we have so much more time to be able to give back and to share life with other people. So and it's funny too. We both, my wife and I, go to different gyms, so we're always seeming like we're headed in one gym to the other. So
Yeah.
my wife much more than I do at the gym, but there's just a lot of time. So it's like, hey, let's utilize this time and do something for to hopefully treat our body as a vessel and to go out and make some good into the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. You talked about your church a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What does your faith mean to you, and how are you using it to impact the world in your community?
So I just turned 48, I guess in July. So I was going to say last month, but I guess we're in September now. But I've learned to be a bit more unapologetic with things,
Mm-hmm.
and not to be intrusive, but unapologetic. Where the older I become, the more I recognize, hey, this really is important. I start to, as my first book, not to plug that necessarily, but I wrote that book in the idea of these are life journeys. These are things that we go through. Let's kind of continue and see what our legacy would look like, what our lighthouse would look like, what we would hear at our, as our eulogies being read. So my faith has been profoundly important to try to, at least be knowledgeable and aware that as I'm,
Yeah.
moving about my days, that I'm very aware of who I am and whose I am, and what I can try to do to make the world, just that much a little better here. And I'm certainly imperfect. I am a sinner. I'm going to make mistakes over and over again. But it's just that freedom to know that He had died for our sins, and that it's just one of those things that it's like, okay, that there's a freedom in that opportunity. So it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so tell us more about both of your books and the
sure.
writing process and how that was for you.
Yeah. So the process, it's funny. I can tend to be a procrastinator. I can,
Mhm.
imposter syndrome set in quite a bit with more so the first book than with the second.
Mhm.
One of my Maxwell leadership coaches, buddies of mine too. We're all Maxwell coaches, I suppose. But I just asked him, as he was somebody that already wrote a book, and just asked him, hey, tell me more about this process. And I think he was with the idea to try to explain, what to do from start to finish. And at that point in time, I was already about 90% of the way done. So he was just kind of speaking into my life and saying, hey, push forward, hit send. This is going to be good. We're going to be able to figure this out together. But that's really kind of the approach of my first book.
Mhm.
It's journeys and different things that I've gone through. And I wrote in parable format, as a lot of the Bible is written in parable format. Why? Because the people that you want to speak to, you speak in stories, because they can better understand the stories versus say, here are 10 ways to do this or that. I
Mhm.
find if you can relate with people better, that's going to be a better opportunity. So a lot of personal stories with that first book. And the second book, it's not as much parable written, but it's just more so one of the, and may not say my pet peeves, I guess, and maybe even pet peeves, that when people say, well, we've never done it that way before, or it is what it is, and people just accept this
Yeah.
like almost like a level of defeat. And I'm not trying to say that there are things that are not challenging and that we're not going to have walls that get before us here, or but it's at the same time, if we don't push past that,
Yeah.
then things just stay the same.
Mhm.
So I wrote that book a bit more from an evangelical standpoint. I spoke about pop culture people also like Tim Tebow and Jeremy Lin.
Mhm.
And I also spoke about some history where it's like Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke at the "I Have a Dream" speech, but his initial intention was not to go into the specificity of the actual dream in itself. He had some good points and things like that, but when he came to life, but he didn't do that thing.
Yeah.
Then imagine where we would be at. With Rosa Parks, it's another thing I talked about. I can join her to Paul from the Bible and how similar a lot of their things were. But if they just stayed put, if they didn't answer the call in their heart, just imagine how society would be, and how
Yeah.
much less of the Bible would have been written if Paul didn't make that, didn't say yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just very passionate about, unapologetic in some cases to
Yeah.
challenge other people, try to do it well, try to do it lovingly. And I don't always succeed, but that's kind of where both of the books kind of came from, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy. You're welcome. I'm happy you wrote it that way because I think the culture we live in, the world needs that type of material. They
Hmm.
need to read it, they need to practice it and live it. Not only speak it, but live it. And from what you've shared, you've done all of those. So congratulations and
Thank you.
continue to do that. Yeah, because we all need it. Um, you mentioned you write in parables.
Hmm.
Most of the Bible is in parables.
Right.
And I've read it, different chapters and verses. I still need to sit to understand what is being said, especially
Yeah.
when it's Jesus that was speaking. Why
Hmm.
in parables? And is that how you prefer to release it and communicate?
Yeah. I mean, no one likes to be spoken at
Mm,
and talked to. They want to be met.
yeah.
Um, you know, the 12 disciples,
Hmm.
they were fishermen. They were, journeymen. They were tax collectors. They were people that no one thought had value necessarily. And Jesus didn't speak in this big dissertation and this big eloquent speech. He spoke to them as they needed to be heard, or as they needed to hear.
Hmm.
So, and I'm reading a book right now, John Maxwell, The 16 Laws of Communication.
Hmm.
You need to learn your audience,
Hmm.
and you got to communicate to them. If you want to receive, or rather, if you want them to receive what you're having to say, then you need to speak not on their level, but you need to speak in a way that's going to be able to resonate with them.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't matter how planned out your message is, or how good it is, or how sharp of a dresser somebody might be and just looks good. If the audience doesn't hear what you have to say, then none of it matters anyway.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
that's why I love, the Bible. My favorite parable too is the prodigal son. There's so much information in there. There's so many twists and turns that you can kind of study that parable. But at the end of the day, it's given in such a way that the people of that time heard it, and
Yeah.
more than none understood it. So it was good.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, the 12 disciples, they were men, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Um, how is your work helping men from all walks of life? How is it helping them?
Well, I mean, as they say, leadership is influence. So I try to influence all by what it is that I do. Have what I say be also what I do, and vice versa. What I do is what I say. I wouldn't say it's just for men. It's hopefully I'm showing a godly life of a man, but I'm more interested in showing how what a godly life is like. Again, I promise you I'll make mistakes, and I'll mess up from time to time and stuff like that. But just one that ultimately leadership means influence, and like your earlier question, if I'm not influencing anybody, then it doesn't really matter. So there takes a level of intentionality and self awareness to try to show what what I've learned and how I am living it. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Um,
Hmm.
Tell us more. What does leadership mean to you, and what are some of core pillars or values that you use within the line of work that you're doing?
Sure. So, and I think there's a misconception sometimes that leadership is also management or titled. A lot of times people say, well, I have this title, so that means I'm in charge. And like, okay, it doesn't mean really anything. Um, and I made a mistake. I rose the ranks in a company, years ago, and I thought I was doing all these great things because I was getting all these titles. Um, but leadership, but like I said, means influence. And you can't influence others if you're not listening well to them. So I would say, probably priority one, two, three, and four, and five is learn to be a good communicator, but also learn to be not even an active listener, but an adaptive listener. It's one that you learn that, hey, my way is not always the right way. It might be a good way, but there might be a better way.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I've got I've leveled up so many different times when I've learned about other ideas and other opportunities that people have said and shared with me. So
Mhm.
that to me has been profoundly important in my journey.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do you help people unlock um, their gifts and to unleash their potentials?
Well, and it's just through it's not even too rigorous of a structure, but it comes through listening. You first kind of talk about the agenda. This is Maxwell coaching like 101. So you listen to their agenda, you hear about what their obstacles are,
Mhm.
you try to work through options that might be able to help them move ahead from whatever they're seeing, and
Mhm.
then lastly, and my biggest thing is application.
Yeah,
If you hear a great sermon at church, or you hear this great podcast, and you're just like, that's good stuff, or you read a book and you're just like, hey, that's really fire. But if you don't do anything with it, then none of it matters anyway.
mhm.
So really try to listen well, and to say, okay, well, let's figure out what's slowing you down. Let's figure out what those obstacles are.
Mhm.
And then with that, hey, let's try this, let's try that. It's like the idea of throwing noodles against the wall, seeing which ones stick. Um,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
some will stick for some, and some won't stick for others, and that's fine. What
yeah.
works for me won't necessarily work for somebody else. But if I'm talking the entire time, and if I'm not listening well, then it's tough to do any of this stuff.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Hmm.
There's so many different types of leaderships.
Yeah.
We could talk for hours. I don't know which direction to go with all of them, but
Hmm.
I enjoy learning from you. Um, when it comes to the church,
Hmm.
what are some myths that you've heard when it comes to how they lead or how they should lead people?
Well, and maybe I'm answering your question this way. Maybe I'm not. Knowledge is power. Understanding, so I also help lead a group called Common Grounds, and it's between 18-year-olds, and we call it 25-ish. I'm sure there's some that are closer to 30 than not.
Mm.
And we start off with a lot of ground rules, and I also am very authentic and transparent. Say, guys, listen,
Yeah.
gals too. I'm sure there's people in this room that have quite a bit more Bible knowledge than I have. I came to the party a little bit later. I was 18 when I became a Christian. But I've tried to study it, well, and try to learn as much as I could, when I have the opportunity to. But I'm still sure that there are people that have more knowledge than I have. But like I shared in that last point, if you're not applying it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll kind of say, well, that's mom and dad taught me this or taught me that. And that's kind of what I feel is what that, how I should lead my life, this or this, that way. But again, if it's not personal, if it's not a relationship, if it's not something that you're really making your own, that doesn't necessarily matter. So to your point, I think sometimes there's struggles, with some of the structures that I've seen. and there's a lot of good conversation that's had, and very strong narratives. But I don't really hear all the time a call to action and say, okay, now what are you going to do with these things? Equipping the congregation. I'm blessed that I go to a church that is so talented with equipping us to go out in the community. So that certainly is a blessing. But yeah, I would say the application can be what holds a lot of us back sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. It does sound like you work with lots of millennials.
Yes, yes.
Um, which, millennials, I'm one. We think differently. We lead differently.
That's
We
right.
feel differently, and we definitely express ourselves differently. How can all generations come together, combine their experiences and expertise to lead in peace and gain wisdom from each other?
Yes. And again, not to plug, but the second book I actually wrote about this very point. Being a Gen Xer myself, I'm on the very edge of the cusp of Gen Xers. Married to one that's in Gen Y with my wife, and so in conversations, and as I was kind of preparing that part of the book, I learned that in the workforce, I think the stat, and now I'm going to get it wrong because I got put in the spot, right? But I think the stat said by the end of 2035, there's going to be like 65, almost 70% of the workforce is going to be Y and Zs that are going to be, working. So if I stay as a Gen Xer and I'm like, this is the way it has to be, this is what we must do, and I just say, just concrete to that idea, and then 2035 comes by, that's a 10 or 11 more years of doing this here, and by that time I'll be closer to 60. I don't want to be, and I just read in John Maxwell's book today, I'm closer to irrelevancy than I've ever been then. But if I learn to adaptively listen, if I learn to really pay attention to who's saying what, that's going to be so good. That's going to really make me better. So again, I can't lead any past what I'm willing to accept in terms of what I'm seeing. So if I just say, here's where I'm at, that's me putting a lid on my own opportunities even. So the more I bite my tongue, not bite my tongue, but the more I'm quiet and the more I use my two ears and one mouth, the better of a leader I'll be. And it really, causes, to your question, if we all listen well, and if we all learn to really kind of get to the point of, what we're trying to accomplish, look for intent versus behavior, then, we're going to be that much better. Stephen Covey talked about, we often judge, with our cognitive bias, just, and we say, this is what that person's trying to do based on the behaviors I'm seeing, not on what their actual intent is. So, and I might not understand how they're trying to come off just based on my own realities and my own perceptions and biases. So you can't figure those things out if you're always talking.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So listen well, my friends.
And we're all so beautiful and unique. So is our thoughts, so is our goals, dreams, and visions. And at times, some of us are so stubborn, we don't want to let go of normalcy, or what we think is normal, to co-create with each other. How can we do that?
Well, I think it's to understand. I mean, even with COVID, people will say, hey, I just can't wait to get back to normal. But what is normal? And even further, if normal means stagnation, because that means you're into a layer of, this is what life will then be like. But that doesn't give opportunity for, upgrading things or improving things. So I was hey, I want normal to come back, and I want normal to do, but after I waved bye-bye to normal, crazy things happen. It's like our own self-centric, control-centric ways that we have. We're like, hey, I'm going to go out and do these things, even if I have a good intent, say I'm going to try to lead my life to do these things. But when I'm quiet and when I yield and I listen, here's what God actually has in store for me. That's when, crazier things that I've ever imagined happen. 2 books later, just the opportunities to, have far more influence than I've ever imagined having. But it's to be very cognizant of why we're doing these things. But if we have our eyes on a grander vision and what our legacy actually should look like, that should destroy normal, because if we're at normal, then we're kind of done and we've kind of already arrived. And
Yeah.
Lord, I hope I never stop learning until the day I die.
Oh, me too.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have that in common, and we have the same belief in common.
yeah,
Yeah, I always tell people there's no such thing as normal, just like
yeah,
nothing, no one is perfect. It's a continuous learning journey,
yeah.
and the journey will be what we make it
That's right.
and how we
That's right.
make it. And all of us are teachers,
Hmm.
whether we're certified or not. We teach people, people learn from us, and it's a journey worth walking on.
That's right.
Yeah,
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 everybody has their own genius.
yeah.
And, a lot of people, you know, won't showcase that if the opportunity is not given to them. So my wife, she's more introverted. She's a remarkable person.
Mhm.
And I've learned that as an extrovert, I have to sometimes take a backstage and not talk as much. And then I get to see my wife shine, and it's so awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, the older I get, the less I know is what I'm finding out. And I think that's cool.
yeah, yeah. I'm an introvert. Never in a million years would I thought I'd be doing a podcast.
That's
Right?
awesome.
I even in school, I just sit at the back. I observe,
Hmm.
I learn, I leave, and I come back and do it again. But sometimes it's good to step out. I've been stepping out. That's why I'm here.
That's excellent.
And
That's
it's
so good.
working. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. In your own words and opinion, how can we continue to remain authentic to who we are? Because there's so much noise around us.
Hmm.
Yeah, how can we do that? And how do you continue to do that for yourself?
So there's the P90X. Tony Horton, the coach, he says just every single day keep pushing play. So it takes daily intentionality. Sometimes you're going to have bigger success than others, but it's just staying consistent. Um, John Maxwell said that, hey, there's some days that he writes and goes, well, that's not any good. But the next day he writes and it's something that's great.
Mhm.
But you have to be a person that does these things, and have it be a part of who you are. It's the idea of the pinata, right? A lot of people say that success only comes when the candy falls out. And I posed a question when I was, speaking one day, and I asked the people I was speaking with, hey, which strike is the most important? And everybody, well, it's the last one. It's the last one. I said, but is it though?
Yeah.
Is it, is it the second and the third and the fourth where they start to really, weaken the integrity of the pinata? When the fifth one you hit it and everything comes out, it's, again, like the chick inside the egg. You only see when the chick comes out of the egg, but there's so much action and so much, energy and working that's happening. But
Mhm.
again, we only see the end result. So
Yeah.
it's having the mindset that if we know that things are going to take some time,
Mhm.
but we need to stay consistent. We need to continue to hit that pinata, metaphorically speaking. We need to, keep working inside that eggshell, knowing that we're going to see an awesome result.
Yeah.
And there will be setbacks along the way. It's just, I guarantee they will.
Yeah.
You're going to swing that pinata and you're going to miss it all together, and everybody will laugh. But it's that next time you swing at it again and you hit it well. So, but just know that there's a great prize at the end.
Yeah. Well, you just described the last 2, 3 weeks. So for me, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've had quite a go. Do I keep going? Do I quit? Do I pause? And like,
yeah,
nope, keep going. It
that's
gets
right.
better. It gets
That's
better
right.
over time. It gets better.
That's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
You should be very proud of that too.
Oh, I'm so proud.
Yeah,
Even I'm so proud. And I've come a long way. So
Yeah,
has all of us, those who are
that's
watching,
right.
listening. Um, and it's so hard when it comes to mindset, um, to think that better will come when we're in the
Hmm.
worst.
Yeah,
I've struggled with that. And I will continue to struggle with it because I'm human, right? When
yeah,
we're in the worst, that's all we can think about. We can't see tomorrow. We can't think of tomorrow.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I'm coaching that I also receive, and
Hmm.
I was really struggling with something. I don't remember the topic. Otherwise, I'd share it with you.
Hmm.
But I remember, and he had said, "Hey, let's actually. Here's an exercise we both can do. But it's like, at number 10, write down the number, the worst thing that possibly could happen, and then number one, the easiest approach to what would happen if whatever this item is,
Hmm.
and then maybe put something at item three that's a little bit worse than one, but not still that big of a deal, and then from 10 down to 8, kind of okay. This is really not good, but it's and then five is right in the middle,
Yeah.
and then he said, let's go back historically then
Hmm.
and think, has 10 ever happened? Well, no. Has
Yes.
8 ever happened before? Well, no.
Hmm.
Maybe 1, 3, and 5, those things have happened. Well, that's more of a likelihood. But I think we get into our own, where success begets success, negativity also begets more negativity.
Yeah.
And I know we can kind of be wired to think and just to dwell, because I am president of the dwelling club. My wife, thankfully, she knows quickly how to help get me, out of it quicker than normal.
Hmm.
But think through things like that, through reflection, through prayer, through, sometimes a good meal and conversation.
Yeah.
It helps out. So just encourage you.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to share with us?
Just to let you know that both books, Still Marinating and The Other Side of the Coin, are both available on Amazon.
Hmm.
Also, my website is coastalleadershipcoaching.com if you want to hear more about what we do. But yeah, just very excited to have this conversation with you guys today, and thankful, Bernadette, that we get to chat here today.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I'm excited that we made it happen. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
I have one last question for you as
sure,
up.
sure.
What is the meaning of life for you?
Hmm. So the meaning of life, I guess, is how we bless others with that life. Ask me this question 20 years ago, I might say something that's a bit more specific to my direct family and how we can see a better life,
Mhm.
I guess functionally. But the older I get, and that's still true, I want to see my family succeed.
Yeah.
But I have been blessed so remarkably and embarrassingly, just I've had opportunities that other people have not had. And it's not financial. It's just, I've had great coaching. I've had people in my life that have been remarkable.
Mhm.
So the meaning for life for me is to, try to see how I can try to impart some of the things in my life on other people. My
Mhm.
life and what life means to me is that legacy, word. People like legacy. It seems like such a buzzword, but
Yeah.
I want to try to be that person that, when they read that eulogy, that, it's like, hey, this is what I want to be known as. So I'm trying to work with the end in mind now
Mhm.
and see how I can try to serve the community well, and love my family well, and learn well from my friends, and but still in the back of my mind have, this is what are these things I want to be
Yeah.
known as. So that's what life is to me, and again, like I say, I will mess it up more often than I probably would like to, but it's something that, I try to keep that on the back of my mind as often as I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Second last question.
Sure.
Leave us with two of your favorite Bible verses.
So Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for hope and future and not to harm you. So it's just the idea that in our worst, when we're in those dwelling times, it's like this reminder. And I know I didn't say it exactly, but it's the idea that God knows you so intimately well
Yeah.
that he is there for you, and he's there to always be in community with you.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm gonna break the rule for the second one here, but I'm gonna say it's in Luke. It's the like I said, it's the parable of the prodigal lost son.
Yeah.
Um, because we've been that younger son or
Mhm.
that younger brother. We've been that older brother. There's because like I said, there's so much to it. I encourage everybody to really dig into that. But
Mhm.
it's to know that either way, the younger brother or the older brother, the father runs after you, and it's such and people at that time they did not run. When you're in royalty and that sort of thing, but the father runs after us, and
Mhm.
it's something that it's just it touches my heart probably more than I could probably convey.
Yeah.
But it's so cool to know that I'm in a relation with somebody that's running after me that really leaves the 99 and goes after that one to try to love me well.
Mhm.
So to that with life, I want to try to love others, even a fraction as well as I'm loved.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all you do, for
Yeah.
sharing your experience, knowledge, and wisdom, not only with me and my audience, but with your community, with the world. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.
Yes, you're welcome.